And I played that game squinting.
Here's what happened to Bill Romanowski. He won 4 Super Bowls, earned $30 million, and set an NFL Ironman record that lasted nearly 2 decades. But 20 concussions, a steroid scandal, and a secret the IRS uncovered turned his empire into something no one saw coming. The making of a monster. There is a certain kind of man who builds himself from absolutely nothing. A man who takes the raw, unpolished material of a small-town childhood, a modest family scraping by on a painfully tight budget, and an unshakable hunger that burns hotter than anything his humble surroundings could ever hope to contain, and forges something the entire world cannot ignore. Bill Romanowski was exactly that kind of man, and the very thing that made him great, that relentless, obsessive, all-consuming, white-hot drive that powered every single decision he ever made from the time he was a teenager, is the exact same thing that would eventually destroy everything he ever built, every dollar he ever earned, every relationship he ever valued, and every ounce of respect he ever commanded on and off the football field. Born on April 2nd, 1966, in Vernon, Connecticut, Romanowski grew up in a household where money was perpetually tight and big dreams were treated as luxuries the family simply could not afford to entertain. His parents, Bill and Donna, raised 5 children on a budget that barely stretched from one paycheck to the next, with nothing left over for extras or emergencies. There were no personal trainers waiting in the wings to guide him, no private coaches drawing up long-term athletic development plans, no silver spoons or trust funds or financial safety nets of any kind waiting to catch him if he stumbled.
You know, there were many nights around the kitchen table where I heard the challenges of how they were going to make ends meet.
As a little boy sitting at that very kitchen table night after night, young Bill absorbed every worried word his parents exchanged about college tuition payments they could not make, second mortgages they were being forced to consider, and bills piling up that they did not know how to pay. He could hear the fear and strain in their voices as they tried to figure out how to keep the family afloat, and rather than let that fear swallow him whole and crush his spirit the way it might have crushed anyone else in his position, he made a decision that would go on to define the entire trajectory of his life.
And I decided as a freshman that I wanted to pay for my own college.
The problem was that he had absolutely no roadmap for how to accomplish this, no blueprint to follow, no mentor to lean on for guidance. Nobody in his family had ever walked this particular path before, and there was simply no one around him who could show him how it was done. Then, during his sophomore year of high school, everything changed in the span of a single afternoon. A friend of his named John Steed showed him a Sports Illustrated article about Herschel Walker that described the legendary running back's daily training routine in vivid, granular detail. Push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, sprints, clean eating, vegetables, relentless physical discipline day after day after day. For a kid from Vernon, Connecticut, with zero guidance and zero direction, reading that article was nothing short of a life-altering revelation.
And it's like, wait a minute, I have a game plan. Like that night, I started doing push-ups.
That very first night, lying on the floor of his bedroom, he managed to complete 11 push-ups, 11 total. That was every last ounce of strength his undeveloped teenage body could produce. But 11 turned into 20 within a matter of days, then 30, then 40, and eventually hundreds without stopping. He began hanging from the wooden rafters of his family's garage to do pull-ups every single day without exception. The first time he tried, he could not complete even a single repetition. He just hung there, arms trembling, unable to pull himself up. But within a few months of grinding through that frustration, he was cranking out 15 to 20 pull-ups per session without pausing.
Every single day, that's what I did, no matter where I was.
It did not matter if he was at the beach with friends, up in the mountains on a ski trip, or at a house party on a Friday night. The work got done every single day. While his buddies drank and partied and did things they should not have been doing on weekends, Romanowski walked around holding the exact same beer all night long, barely 2 ounces gone from the can by the time he quietly slipped away from the gathering and headed home to lie on his bed and throw a football in the air, dreaming about the NFL. There was a voice in the back of his head that never shut up, never took a night off, and always asked the exact same question.
And it would say, is this going to get you where you want to go?
He had taken care of his body with remarkable discipline for a teenager, but his grades were an entirely different story. During his junior year of high school, his coach called him into the office and delivered a piece of news that hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. The head coach from Holy Cross had recently visited the campus to scout players. He watched tape of several prospects and was genuinely impressed by what he saw in Romanowski. But then he pulled the kid's academic transcript, and that was the end of the conversation.
And he said, you know, we like this Tom Kelleher kid, and but I really like this Romanowski kid. And but I looked at his transcript, and his grades aren't where they need to be.
That single conversation was all it took. Romanowski went from pulling C's and the occasional B to earning straight A's across every single subject on his report card. He did not ease into the transition gradually over the course of a semester. He did not set a reasonable timeline for incremental improvement. He simply flipped a switch the very same day he heard the news and never looked back.
I changed it immediately.
By his senior year, every major college football program in the country was recruiting him hard. First visit to the University of Miami and watched his player hosts smoking and drinking and bragging about dropping 2 out of 5 classes each semester and making them up later in summer school. That entire academic mentality repulsed him. Notre Dame came next and absolutely blew him away with its deep tradition, its storied history, and the unbelievable atmosphere surrounding the program. But when he told his parents he wanted to go there, he could sense their unease. They simply could not afford plane tickets to fly out and watch him play. So he chose Boston College, where he played from 1984 to 1987, earning second-team All-American honors in 1987 and 3 first-team All-East selections, graduating with academic honors and the Scanlon Award for leadership. His parents could drive an hour and a half and be in the stands for every single game he ever played. What truly separated Romanowski from every other incoming freshman at Boston College was not raw talent alone. It was an unrelenting mentality that simply would not accept limitations. While 3/4 of the freshman class enrolled in easy majors like sociology or psychology, Romanowski chose business with a concentration in marketing. His reasoning was straightforward and practical. If football did not work out, he needed a degree that could actually put food on the table and pay the bills. And from his very first day on campus, he flatly refused to accept a redshirt year. During a team dress rehearsal held the week before the season opener, freshmen who were expected to sit out the year wore yellow practice jerseys. The players who had earned the right to travel with the team and compete on Saturdays wore maroon and gold and stood on the opposite sideline. Romanowski looked down at his yellow jersey, looked across the field at the maroon and gold, and something broke inside him. He started crying right there on the practice field.
And I looked across and I said, I don't know how long it's going to take.
A week, 2 weeks, a month, a year. He did not care how long it took. He was going to be on that other sideline. He absolutely terrorized the following week of practice, getting into fistfights with offensive linemen, sacking the Heisman contending quarterback Doug Flutie, picking off passes left and right, and when 2 linebackers went down with injuries during the opening game against Western Carolina, he kept inching his way onto the field until head coach Jack Bicknell finally relented and waved him in.
And he said, Romo, do you want to play? And I said, are you kidding me? You're damn right I want to play.
By the 4th or 5th game of the season, against Army, his head coach knocked on his hotel room door at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning and delivered 5 words that changed everything. Romo, you're starting today. Romanowski shut the door and wept tears of overwhelming joy and relief. Then he went out on the field and recorded 20 tackles and 3 tackles for a loss in a single game. He was now the undisputed starting linebacker for Boston College as a true freshman. And from that moment forward, every single thing he did, every meal he ate, every weight he lifted, every class he attended, every party he left early, revolved around one singular obsession: making it to the National Football League. Drafted in the 3rd round, 80th overall by the San Francisco 49ers in the 1988 NFL Draft, Romanowski walked into a locker room that housed some of the greatest players who have ever lived: Jerry Rice, Roger Craig, Ronnie Lott, Joe Montana. He stood 6'3", weighed 231 pounds, ran a 4.76 second 40-yard dash, and possessed a motor that simply did not have an off switch, and his very first real lesson in what it meant to play in the NFL came hard, fast, and brutally direct. During his first preseason game against the LA Raiders down at the Coliseum, he lined up against a tight end named Ethan Horton. They went back and forth all game, getting chippy with one another on every play. After one particular snap, Horton shoved Romanowski in the back as he was getting up, and the rookie did absolutely nothing about it. The next day, the team gathered in the film room to review game footage. When that specific play appeared on the screen, Ronnie Lott, the heart, soul, and undisputed leader of the 49ers defense, told the coach to stop the projector and turn on the lights.
And he walked over to me and he said, "Romo, if I ever see anybody push you in the back and you don't do something about it, I will personally kick your..."
Lott then addressed the entire room and told every player sitting in those chairs that professional football was fundamentally a game of respect. And if you ever let another man punk you on that field and got away with doing nothing about it, that same man and every other player in the league would punk you right out of the NFL entirely. That was Bill Romanowski's baptism into professional football. He never let anyone push him around again for the rest of his career. In fact, from that day forward, if anyone was doing the punking on any football field anywhere in America, it was Bill Romanowski. And that ferocious, take-no-prisoners mentality carried him straight to a championship ring in his very first NFL season. The 49ers defeated the Cincinnati Bengals 2016 in Super Bowl 33. The following year, with George Seifert now at the helm after Bill Walsh's retirement, they demolished the Denver Broncos 55-10 in one of the most lopsided Super Bowls ever played, Super Bowl 23. Bill Romanowski was a back-to-back world champion before he even turned 24 years old. But the very same fire that made him a champion was already burning wildly, dangerously, and irreversibly out of control. The dark side of Romo. Over 6 seasons with the San Francisco 49ers from 1988 to 1993, Romanowski recorded 53 tackles, 4 sacks, and 4 interceptions across 96 games. He was reliable, durable, and increasingly dangerous, not only to the opposing players who had to line up across from him every Sunday, but to the very integrity and reputation of the sport he played. Seeking a larger role and a chance to be a full-time starter, he moved to the Philadelphia Eagles in 1994, where he started 31 games over 2 seasons and compiled 129 tackles and 3.5 sacks. It was during his time in Philadelphia that the darker, uglier side of Bill Romanowski first grabbed sustained national attention. In 1995, he was ejected from a game and fined $4,500 for kicking Arizona Cardinals fullback Larry Centers directly in the head. A deliberate, vicious, completely unnecessary act of violence that stunned even the most hardened and battle-scarred veterans in the entire league. He signed with the Denver Broncos as a free agent in 1996 and immediately elevated his game to its absolute highest level. He earned 2 Pro Bowl selections in 1996 and 1998, led the team in tackles across multiple seasons, and was a central piece of the defense that helped Denver capture back-to-back Super Bowl championships, beating the Green Bay Packers 31-24 in Super Bowl XT3 and the Atlanta Falcons 34-19 in Super Bowl XT3. In that Super Bowl XT3 performance alone, he tallied 3 solo tackles, 1 assist, 1 sack, and 1 interception in what would be the legendary John Elway's final professional football game. He was now a 4-time Super Bowl champion. At that time, he was the only linebacker in NFL history to start in 4 Super Bowl victories. But the controversies kept stacking up right alongside the trophies, growing uglier and more damaging with every passing season. In 1997, a vicious helmet-to-helmet hit on Carolina Panthers quarterback Kerry Collins during a preseason game shattered Collins' jaw, resulting in a $20,000 fine from the league. Later that very same year came the single incident that would come to define his public reputation more than any tackle, any sack, or any championship ring ever could. During a nationally televised Monday Night Football game, Romanowski spat directly in the face of San Francisco 49ers wide receiver J.J. Stokes, later claiming it was a response to being taunted. The cameras captured every repulsive second of it, and the footage spread across every sports broadcast in the country. Shannon Sharpe, who was Romanowski's own teammate on the Denver Broncos at the time, was among the very first people to confront him about it behind closed doors. Years later, on his Nightcap podcast, Sharpe described in vivid detail exactly how the Denver locker room handled the ugly fallout from that incident.
And then, once I found out,
you saw the video?
I'm livid because I'm from the South.
Right.
That's the worst thing you can do.
Sharpe, who who grew up in rural Georgia, made it crystal clear that where he came from, the act of spitting on another human being carried a specific, deeply offensive meaning that was rooted in a long, painful, and ugly history of racial degradation and dehumanization.
You spit on the ground.
Yeah.
You spit on me, you telling me I'm lower than the ground.
The Denver Broncos coaching staff called a mandatory team meeting. Then the coaches deliberately stepped out of the room and let the players handle the situation among themselves. Shannon Sharpe led the charge and made absolutely certain that every single man in that locker room understood, teammate or not, friend or not, what Bill Romanowski did was dead wrong and completely inexcusable.
Man, boy, Bill was crazy, bro.
I'm mad enough to say, if my brother, my teammate wrong, he wrong.
Right.
After the group session concluded, Sharpe pulled Romanowski aside for a one-on-one, face-to-face private conversation. Romanowski apologized, admitted without reservation that he was in the wrong, and gave his solemn word that it would never happen again.
And he's like, Sharpe, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. He said, I'm wrong. He said, I give you my word.
Right.
That won't ever happen again.
The team moved forward from that meeting, unified their focus, and went on to win the Super Bowl that season. But Sharpe was absolutely unambiguous about one thing. Without that meeting, without that direct confrontation, and genuine accountability, none of the success that followed would have been possible. The on-field incidents never stopped coming. In 1999, Romanowski was fined a combined $42,500 for 3 separate illegal hits and a punch thrown at Kansas City Chiefs tight end Tony Gonzalez during a single game, plus an additional undisclosed fine for throwing a football at New York Jets linebacker Brian Cox that struck him square in the groin. ESPN eventually ranked him as the 5th dirtiest player in the entire history of professional team sports. Racism allegations trailed him at every stop throughout his career. The center's kick in 1995, the Stokes spitting incident in 1997, and later ripping the helmet off Tennessee Titans running back Eddie George's head during a 2002 game were all cited as evidence by opponents and media members who accused him of deliberately and specifically targeting black players. Then came the single worst episode of his entire career, the one that crossed a line so far that there was absolutely no coming back from it. After signing with the Oakland Raiders in 2002, where he contributed 111 tackles and 6 sacks while helping the team reach Super Bowl XE a game they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 48-21, Romanowski committed an act of violence during a routine August 2003 training camp scrimmage that would end another man's career and haunt his own legacy forever. He punched his own teammate Marcus Williams with such force that it crushed Williams' eye socket and effectively ended Williams' NFL career on the spot. Williams filed a lawsuit seeking $3.4 million in damages, alleging that the brutal attack had been fueled by unchecked steroid-induced rage. A jury ultimately awarded Williams $340,000 for lost wages and medical expenses, and that steroid accusation was not merely a legal strategy cooked up by Williams' attorneys. In 2005, Romanowski confirmed it himself on national television for the entire country to hear. He sat down for an interview on CBS's 60 Minutes and admitted without ambiguity that he had been directly implicated in the infamous Balco scandal, revealing that he had used anabolic steroids and human growth hormone supplied by Balco owner Victor Conti continuously from 2001 through 2003. He described using designer substances known as the Clear and the Cream, cutting-edge drugs that had been specifically engineered to be completely undetectable by the NFL's existing drug testing protocols. His autobiography, Romo, My Life on the Edge, Living Dreams and Slaying Dragons, became a New York Times bestseller in 2005, and within its pages, he laid out the full, unvarnished truth about his PED use in unflinching detail. Meanwhile, something far more frightening than any scandal was happening inside his skull. Romanowski endured 20 documented concussions across his 16-year professional career, plus an untold number of subconcussive impacts that went completely unrecorded and undiagnosed. By the time he reached Oakland for the final chapter of his playing days, the accumulated damage to his brain had become impossible to conceal any longer.
The house where I lived was 15 minutes away. It was a straight shot. I didn't know where I lived. I drove around
Wow.
And I just drove around. It was 10-minute drive, something like that.
One afternoon, after a brutal practice, he left the Raiders facility and could not remember how to get to his own house, a home that was a straight 15-minute drive away on a road he traveled every single day. He drove around lost and disoriented for 30 to 40 agonizing minutes until his memory slowly, gradually returned. Then came something even more terrifying, a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke. At the age of 37, his brain short-circuited and everything in his field of vision went completely black for a full second, maybe a second and a half. And he was far too terrified to tell a single living soul about it. Not his wife, not his trainers, not his doctors, because going to the sideline meant failure to Bill Romanowski. And Bill Romanowski had spent every waking moment of his entire existence on this earth refusing to accept failure in any form. His very last football game came on Monday Night Football against his former team, the Denver Broncos, the third game of the 2003 season, his 16th and final year in the NFL. During the first quarter, he launched himself into a tackle on Broncos running back Clinton Portis over the middle of the field. The hit rocked both of them, but it absolutely devastated Romanowski. He dropped to all fours as the entire stadium began spinning inside his head. He managed to stagger to the sideline, but the sideline still meant failure. So he ran back onto the field and played the entire rest of the game squinting, because squeezing his eyes halfway shut was the only method he could find to stop the stadium lights from circling around and around inside his skull.
But when I ran back out on the field, the lights were still spinning in the stadium. And I played that game squinting. I lined up, and because if I squinted...
When the final whistle blew and the clock hit 0, Bill Romanowski knew with absolute certainty that his football career was over. His brain had finally, irreversibly given out on him. The final collapse. Bill Romanowski retired from professional football with a statistical resume that, under almost any other circumstances, might have put him in serious contention for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 1,118 combined tackles, 39.5 career sacks, 18 interceptions, 4 Super Bowl championship rings, 5 Super Bowl appearances representing 3 different franchises, and an NFL record of 243 consecutive games played, an Ironman streak that stood as the benchmark for durability in professional football until it was finally broken in 2006. Over the course of his 16 professional seasons, he earned an estimated $30 million in total salary from contracts with the San Francisco 49ers, Philadelphia Eagles, Denver Broncos, and Oakland Raiders. $30 million earned over 16 years of elite professional football, 4 championship rings sitting in a case, and somehow, impossibly, what came after football was considerably worse than anything that ever happened to him on the field. After hanging up his cleats, Romanowski attempted to reinvent himself through a variety of professional ventures with mixed results. His 2005 autobiography was a genuine commercial success, but he later claimed that his brutal, unflinching honesty about steroids and concussions within its pages permanently slammed the door on any opportunities in broadcasting or coaching. The NFL establishment, he said, wanted nothing to do with a man who had pulled back the curtain that far. In 2006, he founded a company called Nutrition 53, a supplement brand focused on brain health and physical recovery, a deeply ironic venture from a man who had just finished confessing on national television to years of illegal performance-enhancing drug use. He tried his hand at acting as well, landing roles in The Longest Yard, 2005, where he played a character named Guard Lambert, The Benchwarmers, 2006, and Jack and Jill, 2011. In 2008, he took on the humble job of coaching his own son's freshman football team at Piedmont High School in California. And in 2009, in what might be the most audacious move of his post-football life, he formally applied for the Denver Broncos vacant head coaching position, submitting an elaborate 30-page PowerPoint presentation outlining his vision for the franchise. The Broncos did not give him a second glance. These ventures collectively showed that some measure of fight and resilience still burned inside the man. But beneath the surface of all these projects and pursuits, a financial catastrophe of truly staggering proportions had been quietly building for years, and it was about to swallow everything he had left. In 2023, the United States Department of Justice filed a federal lawsuit against Bill Romanowski and his wife Julie, seeking $15.5 million in unpaid federal income taxes spanning the years 1998 through 2007, plus accumulated penalties, fees, and compounding interest. The lawsuit painted a devastating and deeply unflattering portrait of financial recklessness on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. According to the DOJ's detailed allegations, the Romanowskis had been systematically using nutrition as what the government described as a personal alter ego, funneling company money money to cover blatantly personal expenses, including rent on a sprawling 6,000 square foot home, routine grocery bills, veterinarian appointments for their pets, and more than 170 separate spa visits over a period of years. Despite explicit tax court orders issued as far back as 2013 demanding that they pay what they legally owed the federal government, the couple allegedly evaded collection by quietly and deliberately transferring assets beyond the reach of the IRS. Consider the sheer magnitude of that situation for a moment. A man who earned $30 million playing professional football at the highest level in the world. A man who hoisted the Lombardi Trophy 4 separate times. A man who set durability records that lasted nearly 2 decades. And the Internal Revenue Service of the United States government had to come after him and his wife for $15.5 million because they could not, or simply would not, manage their finances with even a basic level of responsibility or accountability. In April of 2024, mere hours before a scheduled federal court hearing that could have resulted in immediate enforcement actions against them, Romanowski and his wife filed for personal bankruptcy protection, temporarily halting the government's proceedings against them and buying themselves a sliver of additional time. Nutrition 53 itself had already filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection the previous year in 2023, and then, in a ruling that seemed to close the final chapter of any hope for financial recovery, a federal magistrate judge in March 2025 ruled that the Romanowskis did in fact owe the full $15.5 million amount and formally recommended the seizure of their remaining identifiable assets. The health battles continued their relentless march right alongside the financial collapse, forming a second devastating front in a war that Romanowski appeared to be losing on every side simultaneously. By 2024, at the age of 58, he publicly claimed that he was experiencing no lingering neurological effects whatsoever from his 20 documented concussions, crediting an intensive and expensive daily regimen that included structured workouts, swimming laps, weight training sessions, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, red light therapy, and a carefully calibrated array of nutritional supplements. But the dark specter of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the progressive and currently incurable degenerative brain disease directly linked to repeated head trauma, continues to loom over his future like a sentence that has not yet been formally read aloud. His own mother died of Alzheimer's disease, and Romanowski has publicly stated that he tested for the APOE4 gene, a known genetic risk factor, and has vowed to do everything within his power to prevent its expression through aggressive lifestyle interventions. In 2016, he went so far as to publicly advocate for a return to old-fashioned leather helmets as a method to reduce CTE incidents among football players, a suggestion that drew considerably more raised eyebrows and skeptical laughter than serious scientific consideration. A 2024 study found that fully 1 in 3 former NFL players believe they are currently suffering from CTE, a statistic that places Romanowski's situation in a broader and deeply troubling context. And yet, despite everything, the bankruptcy, the IRS judgment, the concussion history, the steroid admissions, and the mountain of controversy that follows his name everywhere it goes, Bill Romanowski still shows up. As of 2026, he resides in the Lake Tahoe area, where he maintains an active daily routine centered on health, fitness, and managing whatever remains of the Nutrition 53 brand. He appeared on Media Row at Super Bowl LX events held in San Francisco earlier this year, still telling old war stories from his glory days with the 49ers and Raiders to anyone willing to listen. He still signs autographs at memorabilia shows and sports conventions. He still calls himself a grinder. In his own words, recorded during that long and revealing podcast conversation with Paco years after his playing days ended, when asked what he knew for certain in the moments after his final game.
But I knew this, Paco, is I gave it everything I had.
Yeah.
Nobody in the National Football League, I guarantee it.
Nobody in the National Football League, he insisted, worked harder than he did. Not in the weight room, not on the track, not with their nutrition, not in their recovery protocols. Every single aspect of what his body was physically capable of becoming, he pursued with an obsessive, singular, all-consuming focus that left no room for anything else.
And, it was the greatest ride you could ever imagine. Dream for, a young boy to be able to do what you love.
Yes.
He said it was the dream of every kid who ever picked up a football to get paid to play the game you love at the highest level in the world. And he got to live that dream for 16 straight years.
play a game, and get paid a lot of money for it. And I got to do that. And I was very blessed.
But the greatest ride of his life came at a cost that no amount of money, no number of championship rings, and no quantity of supplement sales could ever hope to cover. 20 documented concussions and a brain that may be slowly, invisibly deteriorating with every passing year. A teammate's crushed eye socket from a punch thrown during what was supposed to be a routine practice. A steroid scandal that confirmed every dark suspicion anyone had ever harbored about him. Racism accusations that dogged him from Philadelphia to Denver to Oakland and beyond. And $15.5 million in unpaid federal taxes that transformed a multimillionaire professional athlete into a bankrupt man desperately fighting in federal court to hold on to whatever scraps remain of a shattered financial empire. Well, that's it for this video. But don't go anywhere, because we've got plenty more heat for you. Just tap any of the cards on your screen right now and keep it locked.